This is an introduction to the organization TEC and TIEC. The Education Corporation is the global brand that today operates TIEC in Nigeria. The company is a multidisciplinary consultancy company which was set up in 2004 to help students, parents, schools, corporate organizations, as well as governments. We see ourselves as a one-stop shop in educational solutions, connecting relevant parties to relevant institutions, organizations here in the UK. I would like to focus this morning on USAS. USAS is the University and Schools Admission Services. This is a part of the organization that deals more with student placement, student advisory services, helping students make the right decisions about their career, helping students make the right decisions about further studies. For the sake of clarity, in countries like Nigeria, where we've operated from 2004, we are known as TIEC. But our recruitment arm today is known as USAS, which stands for the Universities and Schools Advisory Services. USAS was set up because we started in Nigeria, but we gradually got into other markets. We started having students from places like China. We had students coming from places like Angola, from Sudan. It was very important to have a brand that reached out to students in various countries. And for that reason, the brand USAS was formed. What does USAS, what does it do? USAS is a one-stop shop, from finding the right school to finding the right universities, to giving students an advisory roadmap in terms of finding the right institutions for them, working with parents as well in making the right decisions for their children, because we strongly believe that the process of finding the right school is a partnership between us, the students, and their parents. USAS today has staff in it, tremendous wealth of experience, professionals who've been in the education sector. Our combined experience is about 30 years plus. In our team are people who've been former heads of school, headmistresses of school, graduates of universities such as Cambridge, many of the Russell Group universities here in the UK, some current professionals who are working in industries such as business, architecture, sciences, and law. And our goal really is that with the experience we have within our team, we're able to provide excellent advisory service to students, to their families, to corporate organizations, as well as government. Our job is to stress relieve our clients. We believe our clients, be it students, be it parents, have a lot to think about. And if we have an organization that has enough expertise within our network to provide the right support and services, then USAS is the right place to be. Added to that is our career aspect. We believe that is one step to come and study, but it's another step to find your career option afterwards. The whole purpose of further studies, be it in the UK, US, Canada, hopefully is to lead to job employment at the end of the day. And we have a part of our organization that organizes a number of career-related fairs. So Africa First is an organization that we run as well. And the goal of that organization is to provide internship opportunities as well as career opportunities for young people post their graduation in the UK. Like I said at the beginning, I see TEC offering a one-stop shop to our clients and to stress relieve them in that process. Hello and welcome to the Next Step Career Podcast. My name is Olugbenga Ogunbode. I am the CEO and co-founder of the Education Corporation and TIEC, the International Education Consultancy. The idea of this podcast came up over 2 years ago when we thought that it was very important to have this monthly podcast seminars which will leave our listeners with nuggets they can take back with them to start making very important academic and career options. It was also very important to us to have this podcast and live seminars because we realized as well that it was becoming very impossible to be at our different locations. We have listeners, for example, in Nigeria, in Angola, in the United Kingdom, in Sudan, in Ghana. It's impossible to be at these locations at the same time. And the way to bridge this gap is to have this monthly podcasts and seminars, which our listeners can also refer to time and over again. So it's necessarily not something you listen to once. You can also refer back to it because it'll be on our website. We're always open to your feedback as well. This is the first podcast that we're running like this. It's a new innovation from the point of view of our organization. So we hope this goes very well. And if it does, we'll like to hear your feedback as well. I hope you enjoyed today's seminar. The idea of this seminar came up in 2012 when we realized that it was almost impossible to be at our various locations at the same time. We thought it was therefore sensible and wise to have this recorded podcast that can be played live at the various locations today. We believe as an organization that information can never be too much. Information is critical in making the right decisions as well as taking the next step. So the next step careers event aimed at helping young people as well as their parents make sensible decisions, review their decisions, and hopefully take away some nuggets from this program that would help them in making their decision. Today, we wanted to focus on a very simple yet important topic, and I tagged that topic, the career decision. Starting first with the educational decision, because I know that some of the people listening to me this morning will be final year secondary school students who are thinking, what do I do next? I'm through with secondary school in a couple of months. What do I do next? What do I do with my life? What do I do with my career? What do I do? And I think I want to first start by giving our listeners two important assignments. You don't need to answer it right away, but I think it's something worth noting from the very beginning. And the first, there are two questions. The first question is, what will you do if failure wasn't an option? I repeat that. What will you do, or what will you be doing now if failure was not an option? And the second question is, what is stopping you from doing that? So I repeat that. What will you be doing if failure wasn't an option? And what is stopping you from doing that? Okay, let's get back to today's topic. Talking about your academic decision. How do I progress with my academic decision? I thought that a number of things were critical in making that decision. Firstly, what I call a self-check. Know thyself. I think the mistake several young people make, maybe sometimes parents, is what I call the comparison mistake. Everybody is different. Just because your brother is a medical graduate doesn't necessarily mean that you're cut out to be that. If you go back and review the vision as well as the mission of this organization, one of the things we stand out to say is that for everyone to achieve their God-given potential. Our God-given potentials are very different. And it's for that reason that I think it's critical that every young person makes that discovery. I call it a self-check. What am I geared for? What am I designed for? What careers ought I be pursuing? Because I think that decision will be critical when you're deciding which kind of schools you apply to. So the first is the self-check. Examine yourself. What am I caught out for? What subjects have I done very well in school? What subjects have I struggled with? So I always say this in seminars I talk in across the world, that if biology has been your most difficult subject, I'm afraid you're not going to be a medical doctor. I don't care how many times you want to pray or do, perhaps maybe if you have a brain transplant, that could be a possibility. But there must be something inside of you. There must be something in your DNA that you've been called out to do. So self-discovery, self-check. The second check is what I call the academic check. What do I mean by the academic check? The academic check is, actually, do I have the right academic credentials for this career I want to pursue? Do I have the right academic prowess, the right academic background for this career I want to pursue? And I think that is very, very important, because similar to linked to the first point of the self-check is the academic check. So if in my self-check I want to be a pilot, but but in my academic check, I don't have the right qualifications to be a pilot, then I must do something about it. So academic check is actually looking back at your academic progression, perhaps from when you were in junior school to high school up till this stage. What subjects have I done very well in? Which have been my weakest subjects? And that's what I call your academic check. Thirdly, your financial check. I think this is the one for parents in particular, because young people may have an ambition to want to study overseas, for example. It might be the UK, it might be Canada, it might be the United States. But do parents themselves actually have the right financial prerequisite for that to happen? And I think this is where I think the family ought to do one or two things. Either we become more practical and realistic to make our children understand. When I go to schools, particularly across Africa and other locations as well, I see parents who are under a lot of pressure as well, because they feel if I'm not able to send my child abroad, my life is going to come to an end. I'm a total failure. And I'd like to say to young people as well that if your parents cannot afford to send you abroad, that ought not be the end of your life. But the financial check is very, very important. You don't want to start the process of studying abroad without working on your finances. Do I have the right finances to start this journey? Very, very important. Next to the financial check is what I call the location check or the country check. How do I decide the country? And I think this is where, once again, perhaps using the service of an advisor like ourselves and USAS comes in handy, because there's so many locations out there. The young people who are talking about the United Kingdom, some are talking about the United States, some talk about Canada, some talk about Dubai, some about Hungary, about the Caribbean. Options and many options. So how do I actually know which location is right for me? I actually think that the answer to that question is not very simple, because a lot depends on some of the things we've spoken about. Some factors hinges on your finances, other factors hinges on the course, other factors hinges on perhaps family contact. Where do you have members of your family? Where do you have your relatives? So these are factors to think about. So the country check is very important. The location check is very important. Which country is right for me? Why am I going to this country? Is critical. Finally, the career check. The career check is, what do I want to do at the end of this journey? What do I want to do at the end of this journey? Studying abroad in particular is an expensive journey. I think it's, for many parents, would be their most important investment. How do I ensure that the dollars spent or the pounds spent or the yen or whatever currency isn't wasted? I think that's where the career check comes in. Where do I want to pursue my career when I'm done? I think these decisions must be taken into consideration from a very early part of the decision. Where do I want to spend my career? Where would I be working when I'm done? Am I thinking of going back home to my home country? Am I thinking of staying overseas to get some practical experience? It's sometimes quite surprising how people leave these decisions until the last stage in itself. But I think this is something that as families, as young people, for parents as well, these are factors that they must consider at the very beginning. Let's now take the career aspect a little further. I think one of the things I felt was very important to focus on in this podcast is for families in particular who are giving young people advice, parents who are advising their kids, what do I do next? I taught in the school and I still do teach from time to time as part of my role. And I see a lot of disgruntled young people who come into classes because they're doing courses or perhaps preparing for degree programs they ought not to be doing. And I think this is where parents must listen. It's very, very important that the process of picking courses or careers for your children has to be one that works in a partnership. I think the whole idea of thinking that we can force or load it upon our children what to do could equally backfire. And I think parents, in some cases, because they've not fulfilled their own aspirations, sometimes expect their children to live up to that aspiration. So it's not unusual for a parent who wanted to be a medical doctor but failed at it to now say to that child, you must be a medical doctor, even though that child has no inkling, no preparation, no aptitude to go into that course. I think parents must spend time with their children to actually also know what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. In fact, you may need to carry out what I call a career SWOT analysis. What is this child good at? What are they weak at? And how can we support them in doing that? But I think from a sort of locational point of view as well, I think that, even though as an organization in USAS, we are primarily working with families who want to send their children abroad. But one thing I also say to parents as well is that don't feel under undue pressure. If for any reason at all you're not able to support your child's education overseas, there's so many good local options these days that it mustn't be the end of the world. I think young people have this false facade that if you haven't gone to study abroad, your life will come to an end. And I actually think that it's a position I totally disagree with. Going to study abroad has many advantages, of which I can list. It's great from the contact point of view. It is great from the point of view of making international friends. It is fantastic from the point of view of relationships built. It's fantastic because you broaden your horizon. But it's not cheap and it's not for everybody. So you must, parents in particular, you must work with your children if you know that this is not something I can afford. You've got to be honest with them. You've got to tell them that this is not viable at this point. And young people as well, your parents are not failures because they can't send you abroad. In fact, some of the most successful people I know have never left their home countries. So please, your life, your future mustn't come to an end purely because you haven't had the opportunity to study overseas. I think linked to that point as well is that sending your child overseas is a very important investment. And if you've made that decision to send them overseas, then it's very, very, very important that you ensure that you get the best for your money. And this is where the kind of podcast we're having today comes in, where as professionals, we want to shed light on information parents should know about in making that decision. There's so many schools out there. Every school says on their website, we are the best. Every school's prospectus says we are the best. I think parents and students must research until you find the right school for your child. Some parents have 5, 6 children, 3 kids, and just because A went to a particular school doesn't make it the right school for B or C. So every child is different. You may have children who have sporting abilities. It might be a sensible idea that the school they go to gives them that opportunity to expand their horizon in that way. You may have children who sometimes have learning difficulties as well. You may want to ensure that the kind of school you send them to will support that particular learning difficulty they may have. You have some schools that are more vocationally inclined, which means for a child who may not be too academic, but who has more of a vocational strength, you send them to schools where they can achieve that vocational excellence. But the final thing I would say in this podcast for today, because the goal is to give you nuggets, not all the information. If you want more information, then of course you have to contact us. But in terms of what to take away with you, I would say for young people especially, I actually think that going to study abroad is a privilege because it's one that not many people have in itself. And I think that the function of your going to study abroad ought to be, what difference can I make at the end of acquiring this degree? There's no point acquiring as many degrees as a thermometer and having nothing to do with them. If it's just acquiring them to make other people think that you're more superior to them, then I think that's the wrong reason to have a degree. Particularly those of us who are coming from a developing country, the goal of our degree, I believe, should be how to improve the countries we're coming from. And as Nelson Mandela rightly said, the goal of your education or your success should not be about you, but how many people you can pull up in that journey. And there are people in your family, there are people in your community, there are people in your country who ought to benefit because of your international exposure. So there's a huge responsibility on you if you've had that opportunity to study abroad. Not only has it been a very expensive investment for your parents, your country, your continent, and your world relies on you coming back to put something back in the country itself. So make wise choices, research broadly, make sure that you're not picking schools because your friends are going to a particular school. Make sure you're not picking school because your boyfriend or your girlfriends are heading to a particular school, because chances are that when you both get overseas, you may never be together again. So this cannot be a reason for making your decisions. And parents, please support your children. Work with them, not in a military style, forcing them where to go. Work with them, have a partnership arrangement where they can actually be open with you in making these decisions. So I hope you've enjoyed the session today on our Next Step Career podcast. I look forward to seeing you again on our next edition next month. Thank you very much for your audience.